Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Friday Night High on History. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Liz.
And tonight we are going to get into the Ibermerasian people.
I've been waiting for this. This is fun.
I've been looking forward to this. So we're in the 20,000 to 15,000 year range now in history. And I'm kind of bringing us down to like about the 8,000 year range because of the whole talking about Mali pottery, which was about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where we were talking about cutting off Africa anyways. It was about that 8,000 range.
Right. And just as we get into early pastoralism, when humans start getting super interesting.
Yeah. So, in my previous episode, we had discussed the Cave of Pigeons, or Tofal Cave.
Yeah.
We also discussed the Cave of Ashes, which was Ihurelaru.
Uh-huh.
And then we also talked about the significance of the genetics of both of these sites. Now, if you really want the full genetic story, definitely go check out that last video that we talked about them in. But I forgot to mention a key point. We got distracted. We got high on history.
That happens.
And
a lot.
I kind of got distracted. And there was something that I had found in a bunch of different articles as I was doing the research over that there was recently an up for debate discussion of giving these remains their own classification of human species.
Right, I've been reading a bit about that too. There's a lot of controversy in the field of archaeology about which remains deserve to have their own classification.
Yeah. So
archaic is really an umbrella term right now that when we say archaic humans, that's really an umbrella term, as I understand it, that covers all kinds of hominids that we haven't necessarily decided to give a specific classification like Homo heidelbergensis or Homo florensis to.
Right. So the remains that were found at these caves showed hybridization of proto-humans and what we call modern humans.
And can you explain the difference there a little bit?
So archaic humans were obviously the much ancienter species, such as like Homo habilis. Why do I keep trying to call it Homo habilis.
And Homo erectus.
Mingling with what we have as modern Homo sapien.
Okay.
And these species here, these hominids here specifically show a hybridization where there is features of archaic skulls and archaic evidence mixed with modern human features in the skulls.
Okay.
So it's showing a hybridization, and that's what's so special about these sites.
Proto.
Yeah.
And then you said modern, and I was asking about the difference.
So the ancient species had more of like the animalistic monkey, no chin.
No chin.
Chin was the big differentiation, the jawline and the way the nose and eyes were shaped.
Okay.
The brow range.
Okay, whereas modern humans you're talking about the jaw.
We have a receded brow line.
Okay.
So in these remains we show a chin. We have
but we also have the
brow line, but we also have a pentagonal shaped skull.
Okay.
The pentagonal shaped skull is literally a skull that when you look at the top of it, it does kind of look like a pentagon in a way.
Okay.
But and those are features of both ancient humans with the modern human traits. So some of the skulls will have chin with a pronounced brow. Some of the skulls had no chin with no pronounced brow. So
you're really getting a lot of variation and differentiation between
showing a hybridization, showing a coming together of species that are making a new modern human. And that was what was so special about these sites. And we found that
at Ashengo also.
Yes, and we found this at Ashengo as well.
Yeah.
And now speaking of early proto-hominids, a species that we possibly mingled with was called Parathenopolis.
Oh, wait. I know this one. I do have to read it, though.
It is down here.
There we go. Paranthropus.
Paranthropus. He's also known as the Nutcracker Man.
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. Any particular reason why? Did
I
you
bring him up. I did. I looked him up. And he is believed to have transmitted herpes simplex virus to modern humans.
Is that why they call him Nutcracker Man?
I don't know if that's why.
Oh, okay.
But that was sometime around 2.4 million years ago.
So dude, jerk.
Yeah, right. Alright, so anyways, moving on to actually tonight's episode. Now that I kind of got last episode out of the way, I really wanted to touch on that because I forgot and I didn't feel like it required a bonus episode.
Right.
And there was no way that it would fit in with your episode.
Right, yeah.
So now, actually moving on to the Ibermerasians. We're going to get into a little bit of genetics, but not so much as like we did the last few episodes. If you really want to get into the genetics again, if you want a refresher, definitely go check out my last episode, my last 2 episodes, because all of those haplogroups that I talked about in Tulsa Rock Cave make a new appearance. The same haplogroups, slightly different numbers, but that's just because different side of continent, different evolution periods, like things happened that made them slightly evolve, which is why we get so many variations in genetics.
Right.
Environment caused us to mutate. That weed gave me hella cotton mouth today. So anyways, the Ibermerasian is a Latin name meaning of Iberia and of Mauritius. Mauritania. Sorry, I don't know why I always try it. It's Mauritania. And again, that is another Latin word for Africa.
Pretty.
Yeah, Mauritania.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Oh,
I want to name a fantasy character that now. That is so pretty.
Well, I'm glad I can introduce that to you. So the Ibermerasian people spanned pretty much all of modern day Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and into the Levant region.
So I just want to make sure. So are these the Arterians or the Acheuleans?
Grandchildren of the Acheulean, which would make them the children of the Aterians.
So this is after the Aterians.
After the Aterians.
Okay.
Yep. These are the children of the Aterians.
Okay.
Yeah. The Ibermerasians are kind of our great-grandparents now.
Okay.
Does that make sense? We're getting closer
not if you're talking about actual generations.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So the Ibermerasians kind of spanned all of like the Mediterranean region.
North Africa, the Levant. Do they get all the way over to India?
I haven't got that far.
All right.
The story hasn't brought me that far. I've been really avoiding.
But all of North Africa, and are they also East Africa? Or Central?
All of East, all of Central. The story of the Aterians from the last episode covers kind of like that whole region, like all of that same region. So we're talking about pretty much all of North Africa through to like the Horn of Africa, or like the whole pretty much northern half of that continent, up into Italy, up into France,
the Iberian Peninsula,
the whole Iberian Peninsula, which is
Spain,
we're talking about
today.
Yep, modern day Spain. And then we're also talking about like into the Levant, which is Turkey, Iraq, the Middle East.
Right.
So all of
Palestine, where is now Palestine, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey,
that whole
Iraq,
region.
Iran, and Saudi Arabia, right?
Yo, we're talking that whole region was Ibermerasian, which was also the originally Aterians, which were originally Acheuleans. And
then the Natufian culture fits in there somewhere, right there around that 12,000 year range. So they're Arterians, right?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Technically, yes.
All right.
The whole genetic story.
I think I'm getting the hang of this.
Yeah, the whole genetic story of all the different heritages of the R haplogroups, the N haplogroups, the E, the JT, everything that I talked about in the Tolfarok Cave episode.
Mm-hmm.
All those haplogroups spawned due to the mass migration out of Africa 500,000 years ago and coming back in, brought them back in. And that's where we see the fluctuations of populations and how we see these groups coming in and out together.
Okay.
So we'll see. We'll see. Let's get into this.
All right.
Hang on. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, actually.
All right.
I'm too excited now. And to think, in the smoke session beforehand, sound check, I was like, oh man, I'll have no energy for this. I'm already excited.
I told you.
Okay, so anyways, now we have an idea of where we're at. We got the time period, and we've got the whole, pretty much, map of the continent.
Right, we've got context.
Region. Alright, so in this new age, we find hammerstones used with anvil-type tools, we find grinding tools, and we've found trapezium-shaped blades, or tools have evolved.
Again,
we're getting more refined.
And that transition into hammer and anvil tools allows you to make more finessed, more specialized. Now you're starting to get into increasingly specialized tools where you have a specific blade for this purpose, a specific grinder for this purpose.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what's going on. So now these genetic linkages has strong connections to the Levant and is believed, and so these people, the Ibermerasians, are believed to basically be what Europeans call Cro-Magnon man.
Yeah.
And Cro-Magnon man is defined as a early Eurasian hominid, Homo sapien, who had language, art, including pottery, clothing, and basket weaving skills, and is known for burying their dead. We've seen all of this in Africa already, too.
Right.
These people, the Cro-Magnon men, are happening at the same time. They're just a little further north.
Okay.
So we've got the southern half of Europe and the northern half of Africa we're talking about right now for the Ibermerasians. And then you get the Cro-Magnon men who are kind of like in Germany and like northern Europe.
Okay.
So
so are they related to these Ibermerasians?
I haven't checked out the genetics yet, but yes, I'm sure they are because of the previous migrations of our early hominid ancestors, starting with Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and then Homo sapien.
They're at least a little bit.
There is definitely some sort of linkage. How, I have not actually experimented on the research yet for that, and what I mean by experimented is looking for it.
Right.
And that's just because I'm focusing in Africa right now.
Right.
So, we have what were we calling them from the West? I don't remember what we were calling them in the West.
Oh, the Kadan?
No, not the Kadan.
No, the West.
Oh gosh, I forgot to look that up in my last video, what we were calling the people from the West. But anyways.
We're talking Bantu. Oh man, this is gonna hurt me. It's gonna burn my brain.
Oh yeah,
why
right?
did I not know that?
And I can't believe I forgot. Well, anyways, the people over at Tolfarot had a different name than these people over here on the east. Now I'm jumping all the way over to Egypt. I found a bunch over in Egypt. So these people over in the east are called the Mekta Afalu people. There was something close to Lu. Oh, I'm thinking of the Lavalotos.
Level up. Never mind.
But anyways.
Yeah, but this is, Makta Afalu.
Yes, we're talking about the Makta Afalu population, over on the east side of Africa. And they are anatomically modern human. They have a rougher appearance with thick and long arm bones and legs as well as feet. Their skulls are pentagonal in shape, which is a common trait of the Eurasian population of modern day. And they had an average height of 5'9", which was taller.
That's pretty tall.
Yeah, they were taller than the people of the West. The people over at Tolferat were found to have an average height of 5.5 feet. Now, Tolferat's remains were Caucasian in feature.
Right,
they had
that.
The narrower nose, they had the more Caucasian features of their skulls. They were not showing white skin allele mutations.
Right.
So they were black people with white features, with the not necessarily like with the narrow features of the nose passage.
Mm-hmm. Which comes from living at higher altitudes.
Yes.
Higher elevation. That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
Elevation.
And these people have the more indicators of the broader nose that is predominant with what we see of Africans.
Central African, down in the valleys where it was really hot.
And they needed to be able to cool their sinuses and be able to cool themselves better, so they had the wider nose.
Right.
Structure.
And you're saying the people in Tolferat Cave were showing the narrower nose feature that's often it's not strictly Caucasian. Not that, like if you've looked at the Ethiopians today, they have that extremely aquiline nose.
I'm using the terms that my research used. I don't feel comfortable using the original term that they even used. They used a variation of an old school word for black people, negroid, for the description of what the skull was found in.
Yeah, I have no idea where we're at on the political.
I was not comfortable with that.
I'm not either.
I was not comfortable with that. That's why I was like trying to be like
more descriptive.
Yeah.
Well, you could actually always just refer to the actual environment because that wider nose comes from that central African basin where the air was heavy and hot and needed the oxygen.
Yep. And that's why I went more that route. And
equatorial.
Yeah, that's why I tried to go more that route. But I mean, hey, I guess I do need to touch on that. Both features, though, show hybridization.
Right, in varying degrees and in varying ways, right. There's no...
Yes. I'm talking about the Mecha-Afro people and Tolferat people are showing hybridization.
Today, Homo sapiens pretty much all look like Homo sapiens, like we do for the most part. We get the occasional throwback, but generally we all do. And in this time, I think the point that we're making here is in this time, human variation, human diversity was kind of peak. Because you had all these hominids, and they're all mixed up in varying degrees. So you have different levels of archaic people, and they've got a little Homo erectus, and they've got some of them, not necessarily these people, but some of them will have a little Neanderthal in them, and some of them have a little Homo florensis in them.
Yeah.
So you have a mixture of features, maximum diversity.
Yeah. I mean, in modern day humans, modern day living today, 40% of our population has Neanderthal DNA.
Right.
So, like, it still exists, the hybridization, the features.
And Africa is unique for the overall diversity of human. You know, they have the shortest people in the world and the tallest people in the world.
Yes.
And I've never gotten over how cool that is.
One of the only places in the planet that has no hybridization of Neanderthal DNA still to this day.
Right.
But I digress. That is a little off topic. So, Tolferat and Mecha-Afro sites have the common ancestors of E1, B1b haplogroup.
And which one is that? Why is that one significant?
Now, due to the bottlenecking population decline at Tolferat Cave, this shows this haplogroup is pretty much the marking indicator to kind of answer your question. But I want to quickly touch on proto-humans one more time because this was kind of an important section of like why this is kind of a big deal. Before I actually describe what E1B1 is. So due to the bottlenecking population declines over at Tolfara Cave, these cultures are the same people pretty much, even though we have different names, and Tolfara died out, and the people at the Mechtoids is another term for the population of
Mecta-Athalu.
Thank you. But they survived. They became the Natufians. They became a lot of up into the Levant region. So these are like I said, they're the grandparents of the Kiefian empires, the Mali empires. They're even the Proto-Berbers. They're the Proto-Caspians. And believe it or not, E1B1B has been found in Irish DNA.
Oh, all right.
So these are Proto-Irish people even. This is how big this ancestor line actually becomes. And so the significance of the haplogroups between these two sites, though, Tolfara showed up on the Y chromosome, okay?
Okay, that's the male chromosome.
Yep, that's the male chromosome. Now, over here, all the same haplogroups that I discussed at Tolfara show up on the mother's chromosome, mitochondrial DNA.
Okay.
So now, genetically speaking, when mommy and daddy come together to have a baby and they have a girl, you don't get whatever's on daddy's Y chromosome. You get daddy's X.
Right. But
when they have a boy, they get daddy's Y.
And so, also mom's X.
And also mommy's X. So as the DNA was passed down from the Y chromosome, you saw Caucasian features show up at Tolfara Cave. Here in Mecca, in Jebel Shahab, which is a cemetery we're going to talk about, you see the mitochondrial DNA passing the same features down as Africanized looking.
Interesting.
That's a big difference between these two sites. Because they show up on different haplogroups that pass down on different features. And that was so cool to me.
Okay.
Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
The way they cross over and the way they show up is just completely different.
That's
Even though they're the same type of haplogroups, they show up completely differently, and I love it. It just kind of blew my mind. So I had to really make that point. And now E1B1 shows up 40,000 years ago in East Africa. And it shows up with the Kudan people, which are a tribe-esque that I'm going to talk about when I get to the cemetery that I'm going to discuss here in just a second. And the Kudan spread it across to the Bantu people. And up around 14,000 years ago, E1B1B shows up in the Levant region. And then it migrates back down, yada, yada, yada. So this gene is actually recognized as the pastoral period gene. It's kind of like the gene that when it spawns, it's kind of the birth of agriculture. It's kind of like the gene that starts showing the signs of Cro-Magnon.
Man?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. God, I love this episode. And so that's when so that gene showing up is what kind of marks in the world civilization.
Okay.
I guess is what you can call it, the birth of civilization. And let's see, skimming my notes real quick. Looks like that page is done. Yes, we're moving on to Jebel Shahaba. That's a cemetery, dude. So, okay, this site is in modern-day Sudan, and it's in the Upper Nile Valley. This is a graveyard that was discovered in 1964 by Fred Wendorf, and this is one of like 3 or 4 sites that were excavated in attempts to protest the building of a dam.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, I was gonna say just like 1964. So I've noticed apparently humans, we like digging for things apparently,
Yeah.
but in starting in like 1928, 1929, there's like this sudden surge of interest in archaeology,
Right.
and then it surges again in the 1960s, and so much of what we know these days has actually come from these excavations that were done in the 60s.
Right.
And then a lot of times back then they didn't know how to or where to categorize some of these bones. They actually did put them away. They put artifacts and bones away for when the future would have the tests needed to figure out what they were, which is great foresight, because we have been able to go back and actually test a bunch of things that they dug up in the 60s. They didn't know what they were. They knew they were important, but that's what they knew. And now we can find out what they are, which is, I think that is also a very cool part of the human story.
And I love that you explained all of that, because that actually kind of explains, like, the build up to why we have some missing remains and why these remains have been tested. Like,
okay, yeah,
you
that's coming right up. Now,
no,
it comes up all the time.
You're a little ahead, but you're right on cue. So this site was funded by UNESCO. So the building of the dam was going to flood a lot. It was going to destroy all sorts of sites. The one set of giant statues in ancient Egypt, the sitting throne ones, I don't remember what they're called.
Oh, I do know the ones you're talking about. Yes.
Those were there originally, and they were dug up, pulled out of the original site of their mountain, and placed somewhere else.
Oh my God.
Who knows what's actually buried under the fucking lake?
Because they made a lake. They built a dam.
They built a dam and flooded everything.
Oh.
It pissed me off, and I digress. I don't want to get into it because there was no fucks given.
Right.
Like, the dude who found Jabal Shahaba, actually was, like, attempting to stop the dam being built to protect their site. UNESCO did what they could and was able to save 4 cemeteries. I didn't realize there was 4 cemeteries until I was done with my research.
Oh, I that happens to me every time. I'm like, well, I guess I've got it all, and then I'll be like fact checking one more thing or looking at, and all of a sudden I'll be like, well, dang, I'm not done. But I am out of time, so I guess I am done.
Yeah. So now, what's significant about this gravesite is this is the oldest known evidence of war. This isn't war like we know war, not lining up and, like, shooting people. This was an ambush raid. During this time, it was believed that it was during the African human period, and in this part of Egypt, it was actually suffering the most. It was drying up, resources were scarce. We also see at this time, I was going to talk about all the different developments of the different rock art periods to show cultural development of practices of, like, spiritualism and, like, showing tribal developments through talking about the cave art. But again, I stopped my episode short because that would take up way too much time tonight.
We're just sometimes we get a little
ahead of ourselves.
And you get on one of these subjects and it does kind of go on and on and on. Yeah. There's so much to talk about. We often start with something bigger and then we have to, like, pare it down. Yeah. Try to make it into reasonable little chunks.
So we have multiple tribes of the Kudan people who raid and ambush each other over scarcities. This is where we first start seeing interpersonal conflict. this is acts of violence against other tribes. And this specific graveyard is an extremely vicious site, and apparently my cell phone is going to be delivered here in a few minutes, so I'm gonna I need a sign for that, remember? So we're gonna pause the video here in a little bit after I quickly wrap up this thought. So then these are different tribes that raided each other over disputes, and the Sahara was drying up, lower inhabited. Oh, okay. So, and it is believed that the lower Nile, which is up by the Mediterranean, was uninhabited because of floodplains. It was just kind of a rough land, very wet, very soggy. They hadn't figured it out yet. And then you get all this, like, differentiation of the climate where it kind of forced them to, like, butt heads. And so in this grave we find the oldest remains. And yeah, we'll pause here.
I actually have no idea how to pause.
I'd say, oh shoot.
I've only ever stopped the recording. I've never paused one. If I stop it, it'll end the video. I mean, you could just leave and I could go through your notes and keep us all entertained.
I mean, did you want to cover, I'll come back, I'll pause here about the oldest remains, and did you want to take Dufana Canoe for a minute?
Sure. Oh, this one's so much fun, too.
Yeah.
So this is actually the Dufana Canoe is the second oldest boat ever discovered. So there is one that was discovered that is a little older. This is the oldest boat ever discovered in Africa. So a cattle herdsman was out in his field when a Fulani man found the world's second oldest dugout canoe. It was buried in the mud for 8,500 years. I mean, so we are in the pastoral period by now, but just the fact that there's a boat this old, and it is a sophisticated boat. Go ahead and, do an image search and look up the Dufana Canoe. You will be super impressed by just exactly how sophisticated this boat actually is. And I'll go ahead and spell that for you guys to make it easy to look up. It's a Dufana, and then of course just canoe. Yes, extraordinary craftsmanship. So it was found in Lake Chad, it's found in the area around Lake Chad. Now, Lake Chad was 85% larger than it is today, back then. So, it's speculated that the canoe once sailed the shores and floodplains of this massive body of water. It's important to understand that much of West and Central and East Africa, kind of depending more on elevation, but much of it was marshland and wetland. There were these deep waterways running all through the continent. And so you could use, we saw this in Ashengo too at Lake Edward. So people were sailing the lakes, and they were also using the waterways and the tributaries to trade with each other. And we know this from the ostrich and shell beads, many of which came in blanks and were polished very deliberately. It is... Okay, so the boat was 8.4 meters long, half a meter tall, 50 centimeters wide, and the wood was dug out to be only 5 centimeters thick. That said, 5 centimeters thick, which is thin, so it was extremely sturdy. obviously, because we found it in, I want to say 2011. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 1987. So, talk about your sturdy boat. This thing was found in 1987, which is just amazing. It's only 5 centimeters thick. I'm not exactly sure. I am an unfortunate victim of the American imperial measurement system. I apologize for that, so I don't have a good head picture of what 5 centimeters is exactly. But the point is, it was lightweight, it was strong, it was extraordinarily well constructed, and frankly, I've seen the pictures. It was downright pretty. When you think of the Native North Americans who used the long, very fast canoes, you can picture something very similar to that long, sleek, shallow bottom shape. Although I believe this was shorter than we typically saw in that North American version that you're probably picturing from the movies is, of course, on a different continent, and definitely the version we're accustomed to seeing is much more advanced. It's had centuries and centuries and centuries to advance, thousands of years, in fact. Right, so this one's a little shorter, but it's got that same overall shape and style and construction, and I wasn't expecting this to take this long, and this is her episode, so I'm just going to oh yeah, let's talk about the graveyard a little bit. So I did a little bit of research. I'm not going to get into the specifics because I don't want to get anything specifically wrong. But with the graveyard, they found signs of violence. There were clearly people who showed both impact injuries and people who showed injuries from projectile weapons. So that's arrows and slings. I don't remember if it was at this graveyard specifically, but I think it was. One woman, her skeleton showed signs of the defensive wound like this. So her forearm at some point had been, pretty badly cracked. And what was interesting was, in spite of that, that injury had healed. So she had been in more than one serious physical altercation over the course of her life. Now, the nature of that altercation, that previous one, we will never know, of course. On the other hand, she did die in this battle, and it showed signs of ruthlessness. Now, there have been those who go so far as to say that this grave is the first sign of war. And there's been a lot of pushback in academic circles to characterizing it that way. And the reason for the pushback is because war is organized. And we're not seeing organization. There is a difference between a tribal raid and an organized battle. And this looks like a tribal raid. It's this probably, the precursor to war. This is how wars get started. But it's not specifically war of itself. You took long enough.
Long.
Oh, you gotta watch that F-bomb. So I moved on to explain why the graveyard was important, and specifically why it wasn't war, like why we are making that distinction.
Okay, so you went on, you covered everything else?
I did Defano Canoe, and you knew that was an interest, a subject, so I actually kind of went on and on about it, and then I was like, okay, well, yeah. So
damn, so I ended up blowing half my episode.
Well, I mean, not half your episode, but like I didn't read your notes. I just riffed off of what I knew because it came up also in my research.
Oh, okay, so you didn't actually riff off my notes. Cool. Okay.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay, and I have no idea what you said. Ooh, dun dun dun.
So this should get fun.
This is gonna get fun. Okay, so the oldest remains are actually dated to be about 20,000 years old, but this is in Wadi Kubiania, which is in Aswan, Egypt. And it has an embedded lithic artifact, which a lithic artifact is a stone blade of some sort.
Yep.
And embedded in the bone.
Embedded in the bone, yeah.
Yep. And that remains dated out to be 20,000 years old. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't actually find much about this. And the site is actually closed to research due to political instability. And particularly after this 20,000-year-old remains were found, a war broke out. I don't know if it had any correlation to the remains being found or not, but a war broke out, and it made it really difficult to obtain a permit to continue the excavation of this site to study it. Right. Yeah. Now
that is a sad thing we run into with some frequency.
Now, in Jebel Shahaba,
that is the cave that I was referring to.
Yes. These remains there were 64 remains found, and they were dated to be 18,600 years to about 13,400 years old. Now, 61 of these remains made it to the British Museum in 2002. 3 are currently missing. And yeah, I personally believe, because they were in the private collection of the original founder, Fred Wendorf, up until 2002. So I think he kept a couple of them.
Okay.
And that's just my own speculation, because they're kind of unaccounted for.
Okay.
Like, they were said to have made it, but they never did.
I see.
So I think he kept a couple. But that's just my speculation, so don't quote me, don't go after him. And so most of these remains were aged 15 to 19, which is considered adult. And for that time period, they absolutely were well into adulthood. So the bodies were considered, the bodies that were able to be identified for their genders were about 50-50. 48% were found to be about female in characteristic. 51% of the remains were male in characteristics. So it was about pretty even. And now every single remain was found to have some sort of evidence of being attacked.
Right.
From most of the remains are actually said to be defensive wounds.
Yes.
Some showed signs of healing, so this shows repetitive nature of attack. So some wounds, like, I get into one person and they have a chunk of bone that grew around a piece of their stone. A piece around, over the piece of stone that got embedded into them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So this is the first sign at this graveyard of interpersonal struggle. This is where we see a repeated ambush attack. Up until this point, it was just kind of like, oops.
Right.
Of when somebody
everything's a one-off.
Yeah, this is where it became interpersonal. And this is the earliest known location to show this. The lithic tools at this site reflect a culture tradition based around group identity. So now, we talked about what kind of differentiated these tools that you saw east versus west. Now we're talking on a smaller level.
Right.
These tools are now also showing expression of whose group is who.
So we're really getting into that tribalism, and this is culture, right? So this is culture. These people now have identities.
Yep.
They're like, we are us, and they are them.
Yep. And this conflict comes from, like I had said earlier before I left, this conflict comes from territory disputes. This comes from the lack of resource. And as we might, and it is actually speculated, cultural differences. Straight up, like, I don't want to use the term religious practices yet, but definitely differentiations.
Certainly taboos can be, like, you don't even have to get into religion for people to become offended by various things. Yeah. What is considered rude and what is, like,
right.
And mankind's just figuring any of this out, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. So this is where it becomes the first site. Now, the first grave that I'm going to talk about was actually a double grave with 2 children. And they were aged 4 or 5 years, and this was based off of dental and bone growth evidence. There were 5 lithic artifacts embedded with each body. They both show signs of unhealed trauma. And it was blunt force caused to the head. There were massive gashes across their bones to their ribs, down onto their femurs. These children were
brutally murdered.
Brutally attacked. Their remains, as far as I understand, did make it to the British Museum. Now, another set of remains was identified as a 30-year-old male, roughly, and that was also, again, based off of dental and bone regrowth. He had 17 different lithic artifacts embedded where soft tissue would have been, or near where, like, embedded on the bone, but not quite in the bone. Mm-hmm. There were 5 impacted flake marks where the bones had, like, shattered, mm-hmm. and, like, left fragment of stone into where they broke off. And that includes into his 7th clavicle, which is somewhere up in this region.
Okay.
And through his pelvis.
So he got wrecked.
Oh, yeah. He got piked pretty damn good. And he was found to have both unhealed and healed evidence. And there were... His remains are missing. His remains did not make it to the British Museum. Now, our final set of remains that we're actually going to talk about are also missing from the museum, and I personally find to be the most horrific. She was projected to be older than 30, and she was found with 21 lithic artifacts in close approximation to her skeleton. And one artifact was actually like a good chunk embedded into her 4th rib. She was found to have 44 lesions across her face. She was stabbed in the face over and over again.
Oh, wow.
44 times.
That is unbelievably vicious.
Yeah. Now there was signs.
So we were good at murdering.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Like murdering each other in terrible ways. Yeah. Is not and has never been and will never be new.
Now, with her is what I see as the first sign of true civilization. She'd broken her arm. What happens in the wild when a deer or a wolf breaks their leg? They fucking die. Yep. Sorry, the F-bomb again. But they die off. She broke her arm. That would make her useless for herself for a little while. Her arm healed.
Right.
So that shows that there was community around her, taking care of her, loving her while she healed.
Yes.
So she had that chance to heal her arm. And actually the break suggested that it came from falling out of a tree or something. yeah. But all the other lesions that I mentioned, the 44 gashes across her face, There were also, like, in her ribs. She was projected to be running away from the attacker when she was impaled. There was a deep injury that the way it fragmented, it either came in or from behind her.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way, she was impaled, either front to back or back to front, but she was impaled.
As she was trying to flee the situation. And so the use of these weapons is indisputable, and they appear to have been mounted on spears with crescent-shaped blades along the shaft. I didn't have any images. There were no artifacts to be found because of how old they are.
They didn't find the weapons that were used to...
But they found the stones that were broken off into the bodies.
Right. And they can extrapolate at least some from that. Right?
And that's where, but the way they described what they thought the weapons looked like, the only thing I could have pictured is like the classic Aztec or Mayan sword, where they had all the obsidian blades embedded in.
I know the one you're talking about, and that is a very neat weapon style.
And the weapons were designed for breaking off and causing massive blood loss, which they did an effective job. 26% of the 64 remains show perimortem trauma, which means after death they came back. They came back through and killed them again, made sure everyone was dead. 62% of the bodies showed that they have both healed and unhealed trauma from repeated attacks like this.
Right.
And that was regardless of age. And the double burial also indicates simultaneous deaths. That means they
died at the same time.
And almost like a mass grave, too, where like, holy fuck, we don't know what to do. We're just going to put these two children together because we can't dig enough graves. And the way these remains were found, how many projectiles were embedded, like I said, the 30-year-old male was the one that had the bone grow over his, his wound.
Right.
Yeah, and that one they actually didn't even know about until 2002 when they yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or no, not until 2002. That was that was her that was found with a remain 2 chunked in her that they couldn't find until 2002.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, because his remains are the ones that are missing.
Yeah. And there are injuries. All of the remains that are found and that are in the museum show that this event did not just happen once, that this was an occurrence. This was a repeated event that continued over and over again. Now, I was going to end on a light note with the fauna canoe. And I have no idea what Liz actually said about Dufana Canoe.
I pretty much went over everything there,
pretty much
including the stuff in Lake Chad, and then I talked a little bit about its actual shape and construction, how sturdy it was. It made a comparison to the North American canoes just to give them an idea of the shape and really the level of construction, which is extraordinary. So I kind of
were my metrics for the
I gave the metrics actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say was that good enough? Yeah.
Yeah, but also like I was super into that canoe, so I knew a bunch of stuff about that one.
Cool. I'm glad you were able to cover it. So I was gonna end on that lighter note because that was kind of some heavy shit going through the remains.
Well, do you we want to get onto a lighter note here then?
So with that being said, we that is the end of my episode. I do apologize for having to run out like that. I totally
life still happens.
Life happens. Yep. So in 2 weeks, when we come back to my episode again, I'm not quite ready to leave Africa, even though we keep talking about we want to leave so bad. I'm not ready. We need to talk about the rock art. We need to actually talk about the
and I really want to talk about Nubia before it was Nubia. I want to talk about the Kadan people.
Yep.
Quite a bit.
Yep.
And that early pastoralism. So I
found a lot of information that I will send to you that I will help you out with the pastoral period. Excuse me. I found a potential mushroom god or goddess. Excuse me. Gosh. Getting to me apparently. So like I said, I found a mushroom god or goddess. Haven't figured out what it is or who is. And I'll also dive into more early civilizations. I had mentioned the other graves. I'm kind of thinking about going to check those out. And there's some cool stuff that I completely left out of this episode because I knew if I went too long, we were going to go way too long. So definitely tune in next week. Liz, what do we got to look forward to actually next week? Do you have an idea other than just kind of peeking at the Kadan people?
Well, actually, I want to talk about kind of the specifics of early pastoralism because, we didn't start off planting crops in like nice, neat little rows.
Yeah,
that was definitely not how that got started. So we are going to talk about the Kadan people.
Okay.
And we are going to talk about early pastoralism and what that looked like, and then they did actually kind of suddenly disappear, and so we're going to talk about the reasons for that a little bit, but we're also going to talk about how this period helped create Nubia, which of course is very important if you're going to understand Egypt and all that it actually is.
Right.
Then you really have to understand what was happening in what is now Sudan, but then was Ethiopia and Nubia, and so this is going to be a lot of fun because this is the very, very root of what becomes one of the greatest, most talked about civilizations on Earth.
Right. So then
that's
we're
what
going
I'll be
to
covering.
cut off at about 8,000 years.
Yeah, about that.
I'm going to bounce back and forth towards a little bit of West Africa again with some of my discoveries. And then once I cover kind of like that 8,000, up to 8,000 years mark, which should be this next coming 2 episodes pretty much, I'm ready to move on to the Levant by like what? Second week of March?
Yeah, right around there. So yeah. We'll be coming, for those of you who are super into Africa, stick around because we're going to go around the globe, but we will be back here. Yeah, we'll have a whole new chapter. This chapter is Majestic Africa. I'll have a whole new playlist for it, and we're going to keep going.
Yeah. So by subscribing, you help us reach our New Year's resolution of 100 subscribers by December 2025. And currently, we are gained a couple more followers, and we are at 36. 36 of you guys, and we're only in February, so thank you guys.
15 videos in.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you. So hit that like button if you love what we do. Share us with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free. And of course, hit that notification bell and you'll never miss a rabbit hole with us. And if you had any questions or comments, you can post them below. Shout us out, and we'll shout you out in the next video. And actually, tonight, we have our first shout-outs. Liz, did you want to take the shout-outs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Nick Terrell, shout out to you. You've commented several times. You've been one of our fans from the very beginning. We really appreciate you. We see you out there. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means the world to us. Here's
Here's one for today.
Oh, here's one for today.
Yeah. So you responded with some really cool stuff on the Long Hard Road to Vote, which was my episode on Susan B. Anthony.
Susan B. Anthony.
I really loved what you had to say. And you had left a comment on another video as well, saying that you found us on YouTube and you were an old friend of one of us, but you didn't say who.
Right, yeah, so whoever you are, reach out again, and thanks for being here.
Unfortunately, Liz has deleted her Facebook, so if you are trying to reach out to Liz,
too much time doom scrolling.
You can try to reach out to me through Facebook as well. So, yeah.
And then last, but absolutely not least, we'd like to shout out also Robert Hightower. Robert and I have known each other for a long, long time. We've been very good friends for as long as I can remember. I was so glad you found me here. Thank you so much for being here, for your comments and your support. I miss you with all my heart, and I hope you're doing well.
And I actually do personally know Nick.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I do personally know Nick.
You know
so,
Nick,
yeah.
I know. So, for our friends who have been here
supporting us, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, so much.
And we'd also like to shout out Michael Farrell for helping us promote us.
Yeah, he's been going around town talking mad love on us, so thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I think that's a wrap for this week, right?
I think it is. Oh, thank you also to Flower of Life for the lovely libations, as always.
Beverages and the,
all the accoutrements. All the accoutrements.
Yeah.
We love you guys so much. Thanks so much for being here. Join us next week as we start talking about the roots of what eventually becomes the amazing Egyptian culture.
Right.
Cannot wait to share that with you guys. As always, live long and prosper.
Bye.